Wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
Well, welcome back. The quarantine continues. This is the last full week in March, I believe. So we're going to continue building. We're dipping in deep into the stash o' wonders and pulling out what this week's model is going to be. And I have decided on this. It is the 1/72nd scale Bandai X-Wing fighter. I figured I owed it to myself after going through the trials with the Yellow Submarine last week, and here you go. See, it did come out nice, and it's got the gloss finish on it now, or the satin finish on it now, and the little plinth that I made for it to sit on. So it's something like this. Looks nice. But after going through all of that last week, I figured I owed myself a kit that was going to be expertly engineered, no problem to put together, going to give me a very nice result, and that invariably leads to Bandai because their kits are engineered to the T. They're almost too simple, and I hate to say that as a pejorative, but it's kind of true. It's like it's hard to mess up a Bandai kit. So this week we are going to be doing the 1/72nd scale X-Wing. Also, we're running into display issues, and this doesn't take up that much room, and all those kind of good things. So let's get to it. Shouldn't be much of a head scratcher this week, but let's get down to it. Good morning, folks. It's Tuesday, and it's prime time. It's prime time, even though it's Tuesday morning. So I decided to pull out this X-Wing yesterday. It took me, maybe that's what I spent a lot of yesterday on, was trying to figure out exactly which kit I was going to do next. And this X-Wing came up in the lottery. So, first thing I want to do is I want to prime this kit. But because it's Bandai, the detail on it is so exquisite. To me, this is less like building an X-Wing or building a model and maybe assembling a watch or a pocket watch. That's just, everything is just so precisely engineered, and the detail is so exquisite on it that you don't want to, muck that up. And first thing I always do when I build a kit is I prime all the parts. Well, if you get a big old can of spray primer out here and you just start plastering, you're going to lose a lot of your detail. No fault of your own. That's how primer works. It fills in small gaps. And like I said, at 1/72nd scale, this thing has got a lot of fine detail on it. But I didn't want to just put paint over it because I've had horrible luck with just putting paint on bare plastic. So I decided to go and try this Vallejo surface primer, which is a lot more delicate than the Duplicolor that I normally use. So I've got that watered down or diluted a little bit. And the problem with it is, just for this particular kit, it is the same color as the plastic. When you spray it on, you can't really tell, unless you're holding it in the light, you can't really tell that you've got any primer on, unless you plaster it on way too heavy, which then defeats the whole reason why you're using it and not the Duplicolor. So what I've done is I've taken a little bit of the Mecha Color, also Vallejo, the black wash, and basically I've just tinted it. I've tinted the primer down so that I can tell that I have in fact sprayed. Here's the one I sprayed with the bare, just the surface primer. And like I said, you can't really tell that anything is on it because it is the same color as the plastic. Okay, everything's been good and primed. I'm just waiting for that to dry, and I understand that this Vallejo primer, they ask for you to let it dry significantly longer than I'm used to with the Duplicolors, but that's okay. I've got time. I'm not going anywhere. But one thing I don't understand, beyond the simple reason to show off how good Bandai is at injecting molding different colors on the same tree. Now this particular tree, this A tree, had a section here of red. It had a section here of clear, and it had a section here of the proton torpedoes magenta. This was all on the same tree. And as fancy as that is, and as lovely as it is to behold, other than these two clear parts, there was no real reason to inject this part in red. Now, I understand if you are not going to be painting this kit and you're going to be using decals, that you could make an argument for that. But they do give you, well, I take that back. Well, no, here it is. These are the decals that would cover those areas in red. And since they didn't inject the wings with the red markings here, these decals that are meant to go over the red marking or go on the wings, if you want all your reds to match, why bother is what I'm saying. Why bother other than just showing off? Because these are either going to be covered with decals or they're going to be painted anyway. So what I'm going to do is prime these so that I can paint them. I'm going to be painting these wing markings, and I'm going to be painting these stripes, and if I want those colors to all match each other, then I need to start with a common gray to start with. So I need to paint these gray as well, so that I'm starting from the same starting point as I am with the wings. Well, good morning, fellow housebounders, and we are going to be doing actual work. Well, I won't say we haven't been doing actual work, but we're going to do some actual putting stuff together today on this X-Wing. Because, yes, I've been stretching this out to take the whole week, but also because the primer that I used, the Vallejo primer, said to let it dry at least overnight before you start doing any masking. So, why not give it some extra time? But today I think we can really barrel through and get a lot of construction built. And I've been playing with going in and using not the Gundam highlighting pen type of deal, but using the black wash and just, doing the capillary action thing here, where you take a tiny drop of it and you let it sit inside a panel line and let it seep out into the rest of everything. But what I've decided to do is to go ahead and to build it up. I'm going to paint the yellow and red details, which would mean the stripes, the wing indicators, the yellow on the front of the body, all of that. And then also I'm going to paint that medium blue gray that you use for the canopy. But for everything else, I'm going to use the kit decals. So because I don't want to get out a bunch of little colored paints just for a dot here and there. So I thought what I would do is take this as an example. I'll be using the decals for the candy cane stripe on the engine or on the gun, but I will be painting the red and blue and yellow bits on here. So let's get into construction. Now we've got basically following the instructions. We've got wings and engines to put together. So let's waste no more time. Let's go ahead and do that. And the way of an X-Wing, this is the way of an X-Wing, is that you're going to be building basically the same thing twice. That's just the way model kits of the X-Wing have been done since time immemorial. They've had this configuration where you have two pieces like that slot into each other, and then they make up the wings. Is that the best way to go? Yeah, it seems to work, because that way you make these pieces individual, but then you have two trees that have basically the same parts on it, and you use one for one set of wings and you use the other for the other set of wings. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and build up this first set of wings with these parts, and then come back and show you how that looks. Okay, continuing work on the first engine block or first wing block, and I've run into something that I want to take care of now before I get too deep into it, and that is I'll be painting this thing kind of as I'm going, and I've run into a bit where this stuff, these parts that I have primed in black, well, this is it exactly. This piece here needs to go inside this piece here, and you're not going to see that. So I primed everything black. So what I need to do is just do a quick dry brushing on the with the let's see, it's the steel color that I've used. Yeah, let me pull that out. That's chrome. That's too bright. What I want is the steel, so let me find it here on my shelf. You all talk amongst yourselves while I look for a tube of paint. I'm sure you've all been there. There we go. Steel. And these Vallejos are definitely easier to use out of the tube or out of the bottle than they are as far as airbrushing. They do clog the old airbrush. So basically you're just going to do some dry brushing of the steel on these veins so that when they're buried deep inside the engine, they will still give up their glorious detail. So just a little quick pass with the steel over those vents. See whether or not you are seeing that. There you go. Let's show it. There you go. Now you can see it. So that when I put it deep inside of here, like it's supposed to go, that you will be able to see the detail deep inside there. And I don't know how well the lighting is picking that up. Let me see if I can. It's not always easy to tell on camera whether or not that's showing up. But I can see it. I know it's in there, and that's all well and good, and that's all I need to make my day a happy one. So just a little bit of dry brushing. I may be overemphasizing them more than you would, but on this tiny of a kit, you need all the help you can get for that type of thing. And I think I wanted to hit some of these spots the same way before I join these two parts together so that you can see a little bit of that detail. Now once this is all together, I have decided, like areas in here that I want to put some rust or some grime in. Once I get the whole engine or the whole wing assembly done, I can go in and decide what areas I need to grime over top of. Alrighty, I've got the first module done, and I was slightly off in my calculations. I was thinking that, or I had said earlier, that you would use one whole sprue for one whole tree for one set and the other tree for the other set. That's not exactly true. The kit is designed with two identical trees here, so you had to take some parts off of each one. Like this required the symmetrical part, they required the same parts, the two number 10s, things like that. So the 10 from this tree and the 10 from that tree. But some parts are across the board identical, so you didn't have to worry about that. But that, like I said, that, your mileage may vary, but that was just a slight mistake on my part that I stated that and should not have. So we've got the first half of the wing section done, and I decided what I need to do is wait until I've got both sets done before I do any weathering, or do any more weathering, because they are going to run into each other like this, and I want to make sure that my weathering is consistent on both pieces. And if I just start doing one and then don't do the next one until a slight time later, I may be a little bit off on things. So I want to go ahead and do this as a module, but you can see where I sprayed the primer on this when it was on the tree, and now that it's together, you can see where I need to unify those colors and all of that. So something that can be done once I have that, once I have both of these set up. So we've got the second one here. We're ready to follow the instructions again, once more with feeling, because we basically have to do the same thing again that we just did. So let me fold out the appropriate section on the instructions, lay them in front of me, because it's true, real men do use the instructions. Sometimes. No, the truth is I've built X-Wings so many times that I know where the parts go and I know what the parts look like. It's just a question of doing it in the neat and proper order, and I need to clean off the area for the pieces that I don't need right away. See, things like that keep falling. So let's clean this tabletop off and get down to the only to the things we need. Okay, we're ready to start building on the second wing structure. And what I've done, I've just basically cut some of the parts off of the sprue for the sub-assemblies. And yes, I am using glue. I mean, there's no way, you don't really need to. It's a Bandai kit, but it's not like they're going to stop you at the pearly gates and say, oh, you led a good life, but you used glue on a Bandai kit, and so therefore we're not letting you in. I mean, glue on a Bandai kit is belt and suspenders, and it will stop the Bandai squeak, which you have heard me rail about in the past. But now that I know what parts are needed and I have pulled them all out, I can quickly zoom through the construction of the thing. The nice thing about using glue on a Bandai kit also is that it will help the parts slide together, even though it's a very tight and very well engineered fit. See, there you go, there's one of the engines. A little bit of glue on it will help those really tight fitting parts slide together a lot easier. And so I always prefer putting the glue on the piece with the receptacles, with the sockets, and not with the lugs, because I can put it down inside the holes there. But I'm just using a little bit of, and it may look like a 10X bottle, but it's straight MEK from the hardware store. I just transported it over to an old 10X bottle to make it easier to work with, rather than working out of a big gallon can. But we're just sliding these parts on. And the nice thing about the tight engineering of it is that you don't need clamps on a Bandai kit. If you are gluing the pieces together, they will go together nicely, and you don't end up needing a lot of clamping like you would with some other kits. Not a knock against those kits, it's just, these are designed with snap together tolerances, so they are a little bit more tightly engineered. Now these, I put a slight metallic sheen to them. I don't know if that's canon or not, but I always have, ever since I was a kid. When you're building the engines inside an X-Wing, I always just put a little bit of the metallic on there to give it some little shine going on inside there, because you want a little bit of reflectivity going on. Now I'm going to put some rusty and some grime in these engine wells, just to give it a little bit of life. But like I said, on a Bandai kit, this is all belt and suspenders, because it doesn't really require it. There you go. And then flip it over and we do it again. I'll go ahead and put this piece in first this time. And then I'll probably give this thing a good Zotzen of not primer, certainly, because we don't need to prime it again. But I do need to go back in and unify some of these colors, so maybe a wash over some parts, maybe some dry brushing over some of the other parts. Come on, you can do it. Oh, I should have put that part in first, because it has to go under it. No, it will. It fits. The satisfying snap of a well-designed kit. Let's see, the next thing I need to do is put these wing inserts in. But even though the connection points to the sprues are very nice on these, they could stand to have a little bit of sanding done on them. So I just hit it with just around the edges where they made connection. Okay, and then these are ready to go in, and I have pre-painted the wing inserts. So this area is right in here, so that when we put the wings in, you will see those little darkened holes inside there. So, and again, these nice big boxes here that join in when you have glued them. When you put a little bit of glue on it, it does such a nicer job as far as lubricating that and making it easier for it to slide in. And you don't find yourself having to file anything or sand anything. Just putting a couple drops here on the back of the part that I'm getting ready to snap in. There you go. So yeah, we're going to have to see where this overlap part is. Now that should be the same color as that inside of the wing, so I'm going to level that out and some of these other spots, but I want to try to leave these dark, or at least darker. So that's that. Let's do the tiny guns. And apologies if everything is not visible on camera. I'm trying to build towards my eye, not towards what necessarily looks good on camera. So I need to make sure that I'm doing a better job of holding that up and showing it to you. And again, a little glue on the top, and making sure that fits, and a little glue on the back. There we go. That's an gun and ready to go on. Now, also I apologize for the towel, but I have in my modeling history, I have found that having a towel here is good for me, because if I spill anything, the towel will absorb it and it doesn't run all over the desk, particularly since I'm working off of my old glass top drafting table, and therefore paint and solvents and glue and everything else has a tendency to run all over the place. So some people work on a cutting mat. I have a cutting mat underneath the towel. Cutting mats also, if you drop a little paint on them, it'll smear all over the place. But a towel, particularly an old terry cloth towel, will just absorb the paint straight down, and you don't have to worry about it spreading. I have, on occasion, knocked that over with reckless abandon, and the glue goes everywhere. Well, if it hits the towel, it sucks up and it doesn't run and hit your plastic parts and melt them uncontrollably. So that is why I use the towel. I know that when I paint, I can try it. I blow the brush out on the towel, and it makes an ugly mess here. So sooner or later, I have to change out to a fresh towel. But luckily, they're not that expensive. Okay, so we've got that done. Let's attach the guns to the wings. That's the next step. And again, these are symmetrical, so you can pop them on and it will go in place. That one will work there, and see, almost did it there. Gotta be careful, particularly if I have had my morning coffee and I've got my jitter nerves. Okay, so those are on. Next thing to do will be to put these guys down. And again, they are symmetrical. They go here, and they go here. Now, because these are individual, the cowlings for the top, there is one cowling for the, let's see, this one goes, I'll bet, yeah, this one goes on the bottom, and this one goes on the top because this has the landing gear attachment area here, so it uses different parts to make it go. It does not use that's where the symmetry ends. See, we're starting to get there. We've got this much together. And I'm just putting these together so that I can check the squareness of these outside guns. Make sure that they are level and square and parallel to each other so that it's not as noticeable now, but when you get those long guns on the ends of it, you're going to notice if they're off kilter. So now we pull those back apart. That's the set that is dry, and this is the set that is left. Okay, I'm going to shut down the camera for a bit, finish this up, and go on to the next step. Alrighty, I've got the last little bits of the wing assemblies to worry on, and I've decided that even though this kit gives you the options of having the landing gear down or up, since the whole raison d'etre of this kit is showing you the firing of the torpedoes, and since the X-Wing did not have its landing gear down when it did that, I've decided to just cover over those landing gear wells with the actual, with the full covers, and so I just need to glue those on. I'm not going to be worrying about fixing the landing gear, painting the landing gear, doing anything with the landing gear, so I can go ahead and cover those wells up, and then I am ready for the next round of detailing and painting and covering over, like I said, getting the okay, that goes towards the front. Yes, that goes like that. Okay, so that's covered. Now the next thing to do is to put the lime in the coconut, and oops, did it the wrong way. Do it like that. Yes, make sure the slots line up, and put the covers over the ends to kind of lock them in place. I realized I had this in upside down. I just flipped it around. The nice thing about Bandai is you know, you don't, these parts I'm certainly not going to glue down because I'll glue them into the framework, but not to the wings, because the whole idea is to be able to do the opening and closing. So, and yes, you can make the argument that I should probably glue them in the open position, since if I'm not going to use the landing gear, I should have it in the open, since the S-foils were locked in attack formation, so it would be like that and glued down. But I want to have at least a little bit of playability. So I think the thing to do at this point is to look at the parts that I'm going to need, and that is the R2 unit and the forward guns, or the quad lasers. I need those, and this is all landing gear, and hatch covers I don't need. Same thing over here. I've got the R2, and I don't know why there's an extra one of these. That's just, they stuck it on there. I've got all of mine accounted for. There just seems to be an extra engine cover there that I don't need. Weird that they would include that. That they would bother engineering another one of those. Okay, this is the, and someone can help me with this. I thought I was pretty much up on my X-Wings, but there are two nose pieces supplied with this kit. And if I put them next to each other, I am darned if I can see any difference. I'll cut them off of the sprue here so that you can see. I don't know why they included two of them. They have this, well, I'm trying to see if there's any difference in them. They are the same profile. They are the same size this way. One of them looks a little fatter, and I'm wondering if it's meant to be used with the landing gear, if it has something to do with the front landing gear panels. So when we get to that point, I will bring that back out. But we are largely finished with a lot of the sprue for this kit. I'm going to start painting on the wing assemblies. Now I've attached the guns for no other good reason other than the fact that I want to weather them at the same time. They're certainly not glued in, and I will be removing them after everything is done so that I can keep them safe. But while they're here, while I'm painting this, I kind of want to be able to address all of that at the same time. So first thing I need to do is kind of touch up and even up the gray, and this time I'm going with Tamiya, a little bit of sky gray and some white just mixed in to get a very light gray. Let's see how swell this is going to go down. I'm just going to mix it in the old copperoo here. Careful not to. I don't mind contaminating my gray with white, but I do not want to contaminate my white with gray, because that way is the quickest way to ruin a jar of white. So a little bit of there, a little bit of this, a couple drops of thinner, get it all mixed down. And then I'm pondering, and I think the best thing for me to do next would be to go ahead and paint the red indicators, the red stripes. And again, since this whole kit's idea is that it is the Death Star attack, then it is obviously meant to be Luke's X-Wing. So it's going to have the full 5 stripes on it. But I think that would be the next thing to do, would be to put the red on there, and then all of my weathering, and if I want to do any chipping of that, that would all come up off of that at the same time. So yeah, got a little bit of gray going on here, and like I said, my predominant interest is to clean up and match up some, clean up and match up some colors here. I'm going to try to either card it or just block it out by hand to kind of try to keep the these depressions here a little bit cleaner. There we go. Just trying to level out the color of the grays between the front, between the inside and the outside of the wings. Just trying to get everything to a good, basic, even playing field as far as all the disparate grays I've got going on here. The only thing I'm really trying not to touch are the inside engines, or inside of these details here, and then of course the main engines out on the back. I don't know how successful I'll be at that, but it also gives me a convenient handle to grip it by. And like I said, this was primer. It was never meant to be the final color. So I'm doing my best just to level up the grays. And you can see why I wanted to include the guns at this point, so that I can get them all leveled out to the same gray at the same time. And I know the only thing less exciting than watching paint dry is watching somebody airbrush paint on. So as you can see, kind of the idea of how I'm just re-indicating the gray. I can turn the camera off. Okay, so it's time to put some color on this beastie, and I'm going to spray I've got the masks in place for the top wings. Well, for one set of wings. These would end up being the top once you put everything back together. But I figure it's better to do the top sides or one off of each wing section, then wait for that to dry, or at least wait till after I've sprayed it to take this outside tape off, and then move to do the other ones, because if not, then I'm fumbling around a bunch of tape, and that's nobody's idea of a good time. So let's go ahead and spray these two, then take the painter's tape off. Okay, I've got the painter's tape off, and now I'm just going to go ahead and peel off the masking and see what's underneath. There you go, one painted wing. Now what this allows me to do is to add my weathering and streaking over top of that. So if I've got any laser hits or smoke smudges or anything like that, then that happens over the markings at the same time. It looks a little bit more fluorescent on camera than it does in real life. So now I can go ahead and do the underside, flip this over, put the masks on, and do, I also at the same time resprayed over top of these red pieces that go on the stripes along the edge, now that they are the same color of red. Even though they were red plastic to start with, it's not quite the same red, and I can weather over top of these all at the same time with washes and whatnots. And there you go. It's a nice set of markings top and bottom now. And we're going to let these dry for a bit so that I can go in here and start putting in some more washes and such. But like I said, I wanted to get those down first so that any weathering, especially the panel lining stuff, would go over top of that red. Okay, I just finished putting down the blue-gray. That is the color of the canopy, and I also did the no window canopy version, but this is the clear parts with the windows masked off, and also the leading edge of the engines, and this little bit here, which I will cover over with a mask so that I can paint the rest of it. But doing little things that don't touch each other is the hard part, because you want to stay away from them long enough for them to have a chance to dry on their own without getting your meaty paws all over them. Okay, I've just spent the last hour or so playing around, doing some little touch details, doing things like painting up the pilots and putting together the cockpit, things like that. Things I don't necessarily want to have an audience for, because, if it goes wrong, then there's wild cussing, and you don't want to see that. So working on, again, the cockpits and getting the droids ready for, it's a weird thing, the way they built R2 with the third leg out already, but luckily there are two droids in this kit because of the way the parts are doubled up. So I can do a three-legged R2 that I can have, standing next to the pilot Luke, something like this. But then I can alter the other one and chop off the middle leg so that it can sit into the droid slot correctly. Now the last thing I just did was I masked over the yellow bits of the stripe that I wish to retain. I painted this yellow, let that dry, and now I am putting the stripe over so that I can paint gray around it and leave the yellow protected, as well as the blue area around the rim of the cockpit, which matches the blue of, I call it blue, the blue-gray of the canopy frame. So I think that's where we're going to end it today. I also put the yellow on here, and you can see me marking or masking off some stuff here that I want to keep the colors that they are. But I want to let this get this good and dry before I go into it with washes or anything. Look at this mess. This is where we're coming to the end of on Wednesday, and now is the time where I'm having the fun. I'm starting to get the grunge out and really grunging up this X-Wing, and it's a little bit of everything. It's all of these Vallejo weathering sets. It's oil stains, it's streaking grime, it's petrol spills, it's a little bit of rust texture, everything. This is more of the Mecha wash, black wash, but that's where you start throwing in some of your base coloring and getting some of the rust in there, because it's really a kind of a drab thing by itself. I mean, here's what it looks like. Let's just give an example. This is what the inside of one wing looks like versus the unpainted version, and a painted wing versus an unpainted wing. You get the idea. It's a lot of fun doing this kind of stuff, and it's absolutely no manual for how to do it, no right or wrong, just playing in the mud. So kids, welcome back. It is Thursday and it is fun with weathering. Just playing around today. I mean, there's not much much more you could say to it than that. I'm trying to clean up a bit here because it does accumulate the mess very quickly when you start splashing around your washes and your mud and your weathering effects. And frankly, I need to pop out to the store and get some more while the getting is good. But where we left off yesterday with painting the detail on my pilots and stuff, starting to piece together the cockpit and get that dry brushed. I don't know if I want to use the decals in the cockpit or not. I probably should at least try them to see how they're going to look before I decide whether or not to use them. But I have nixed the decals on so much of the rest of the kit that maybe I should. I've got plenty to use in here, and I've got the R2 decals and things like that, so maybe I should. But going in and deciding to paint the stripes, the yellow stripe and the red stripes, I think is giving me the best overall look, because you just can't beat it when it comes to being able to put your washes over it and have it come out looking good and not looking like the rest of the or not looking like you're trying to paint over a decal. So it's looking pretty good. It's looking like that. We're almost to the finish line on it. Still a little bit more to go. I want to obviously I've got work that needs done on the insides of half of these wings, but I'm happy with the outsides more or less. Welcome back. Well, you haven't gone anywhere. It's me. I was out and about today. I had to do some shopping while we still could. I mean, it's not all that dire, but I had to go to the hobby shop because I realized how low I was on quite a few paints that I was going to be needing, and I needed to get restocked before anything happens that might impede my ability to go to do said shopping. They're starting to crack down on what can be open and what can't be open, so I wanted to make sure I can get some replacement. Say the words, Lou. Replacement paints, and some primer and some glue and stuff like that one needs if one is facing a sequester. So That's what I did, but I am back to finishing up on the X. Oh, I also picked up what is going to end up being next week's and probably the week after's build. It was an odd little thing. When I called the hobby shop to make sure they were going to be open, my buddy Brian, who runs the place, said, "Oh yeah, I got this model to show you when you get here." So I went and took a look at it. I'm not going to show you here because, you know, depending on what order you watch these in, you may or may not see them the right way. But it is an odd little duck, and which is kind of good because I was getting burnt out, and being burnt out and building models every day is not a healthy mix. But I was getting burnt out on Star Wars and Star Trek and the same old, same old. And this is definitely different. So I'll look forward to treating you with that next week. But today we need to finish up on the X-Wing, and first thing I need to do is take these two wings apart and paint the insides here that are still rather missing and lax. So then we could put these last bits together because there's not really all that much left to do. Let me clean up here and organize. Oh, I also, more importantly, went to Walmart and got more Q-tips because I realized how close to the bottom of the barrel I was on Q-tips. And I go through these things like water. So it was good that I was able to find some more Q-tips. So let me get cleaned up and we'll get back to square one here. Sorry, I realized I was doing all this and I didn't have the camera rolling. Just putting the body sections together. And yes, I did the screw up. I'll admit to it. It's easy to fix, but it's a screw up nonetheless. And I am just going in through and touching the joint here with a little bit of the 10X, or sorry, the MEK to secure it. But yep, I had these wings. The wing cluster is upside down. There's all the fancy stuff right here, but it's on the bottom, so it doesn't matter. I'll just paint it again up here on the top. It doesn't hurt me none. That's what you get when you've got a completely symmetrical design, though. You have to make sure you know which end is up at all times. But now that the big chunks are together, I can do the final bits of weathering. Like it made no sense to weather across all of this until I could join it up. And you may notice I've taken the guns off to make that easier to deal with. The one nice thing about Bandai kits is that they're not permanently, you can take them apart many times if you need to, so that joint was never made permanent. Now R2 has not gotten his decals on, so I can't trap him in there. But let's see, back panel needs to go on, and that would finish that. And testing the wings. Wings do their thing. Everything looks good in there. All I need to do now is bring over some of those colors that I had down here back over to the top. And then, you know, eventually I'll learn which way is up and everything will be good. So let me put this rear cap on. This rear cap is going to hold a lot of everything together. Now I don't have to worry about getting any glue on the pivot here, so just putting this back piece on. Nice, nice. And the last thing is to put the front nose piece on. I still am at a loss to figure out why there are two of these. So I just pick one and push it in place. Now that I know that it's in place, I will go back and throw some glue on it because I don't wish to make it removable. I know for some reason there it looks like there's a gun hidden behind there, but that's a bit of arcane trivia that was never expressed in the movie, so I don't trust it. Here we go. Okay, we've got the front piece on. Let's see, last thing to do really is to put in some decals before I close this up. We need to decal R2, we need to try the decals on the dashboard there before we decide whether or not we are going to use them. But here we got that with the, of course I still have my masks on the canopy, so we'll leave that for a few seconds. Okay, so I just did a little bit of repair painting to bring those colors back to this side. So now, yes, it's symmetrical. I've got it here and I've got it here, but hey, X-Wings, you know, sometimes can be symmetrical. And the last thing I'm doing for the day was another pass on the standing Luke pilot. There we go. Don't know where he'll ever be used, but I'll know that he was painted well. So, last things to do really, clean out the brush, clean up the area. I'm going to let all this stuff dry and then come back for one last dirtying pass tomorrow, and then the decals. And if I'm of a mind to doing it, I might even start the decals tonight. Well, good morning. It's Friday, and you know what that means. It means tomorrow's Saturday. So we are down to the last work day of the week, and yes, it's the last work day on this X-Wing. Finishing up today will be no great stretch because we're almost done. The only thing we've got left to do is some niggling details and some decals and putting it all together and tying a bow around it, but it's mostly done. First thing I'd like to do today is find my glue, find my my 10X or my methyl ethyl ketone, which is what I've been using on everything. And I want to take these two figures that come with the kit that really don't have a great place in the further diorama-ness of this, since it is built up to be Luke firing the proton torpedoes into the exhaust port. And I don't want to spoil a movie that's this old for you, but he destroys the Death Star. I don't want to tell you. I mean, if you haven't seen it, I hate to spoil it for you. But he blows it up. Kills many thousands of people. He is the single biggest mass murderer next to maybe Darth Vader. He gets it from his dad. But yet, he's the hero of the movie. Really, the standing figures are a nice addition, but they don't really have anything to do with that moment. So what I want to do is to glue them down to a piece of scrap styrene sheet that I've just cut to an irregular shape. And what that's also going to help me with is it's going to give me a much better base when it comes to putting the decals down, because it will give me a wider area to grab it by while I am applying decals and whatnot. It's not something that you can do easily, and since so much of R2 and Luke have decals on them, I don't want to, be touching on areas with wet decals. So I can glue these guys down and then hold it by the base while I'm decaling. So that's reason number uno to be doing that. And secondly, I want to try using the candy cane striping decals for the guns. I want to see how well those work. And some of these smaller body decals, these tan ones, I want to put in place. And then we can finish the final weathering over top of everything. I need to decal the R2 that is poking his little head up there. I just brought him up far enough to do the dome because everything else is going to be pushed down inside the socket, so I don't really need to decal that. Yeah, like I said, I've got some tiny decals. I also need to do like the black tips on the exhausts and some tiny niggling little details. You've all been there. You know the routine when you get down to the small areas that are left. So, while that's drying, I need to go whip up my, get my decaling accoutrement out and get it ready. Well, these worked out very well. These are the candy stripes, the candy cane stripes that go on two of the guns. Those are, I expect nothing less from Bandai's decals. They're always top notch. And the important thing about these, particularly in the small amount of detail or the great amount of small detail that we've got, is that the carrier film is not, doesn't stick out much beyond the printed image, which is important because if it has to get into a tiny crevice and you're stuck with a bunch of extraneous carrier film, then you're left either trying to slice that off or cut it off with tiny scissors, because that can actually push the decal out of position if it's got too much carrier film on it. So heartened by that success, I am ready to go on ahead and start working on some of the other areas that get the decals. Now, I think what I want to do is start in the center and move outwards. So I think what I want to do next is the control panel, the dashboard, the cockpit decals, because that's some area that I really couldn't paint all of that detail. I mean, you kind of get sloppy, and you can do a dry brush and hit some of the high points, but not as easy to paint as you would think it is to do. So if they're going to give you decals, it might at least try them, and if they don't work, then you can always fall back on painting. But you know, why not start that first? And the other tiniest of tiny things is they actually make a decal for the stripe and the two Firebirds that go on either side of this helmet. So that would be the next thing. And then again, like I said, starting in the center and then kind of working my way out towards the outboard parts. Wisely, the Bandai people have included extras on these tiny decals because you need them in case anything goes awry. But look at that. That's a stripe on Luke's helmet there, and the Rebel insignia that go on both sides. That's some tiny detail. And again, no one should ever have to put their work that close up to a camera. But I do that just to show you the level of quality and detail on these decals, not because I've got any great love of showing my work in microscopic detail like that. So now I'm continuing to wrap the R2 unit here so that I can push him back down inside the cockpit there. And then if I'm feeling brave, I will go on and do the same thing on these two characters now that I've got a adequate base to work on them with. And then, the cockpit ones went in very well. The cockpit decals, very happy with those. And just the tiniest drop of Solvaset to let them nestle down into where they're supposed to be. And work continues. Tedious work, but you know, a good pair of magnifying glasses and tweezers, and you can make short work of it. You have to be careful that your X-Acto knife isn't, you know, way too sharp, because you can actually poke into the film and it won't want to let loose. I find myself using the back end of the X-Acto knife or the back side of it to move things around, because you don't want to pierce it and have it get caught on the X-Acto blade. Wow, that was intense. That was me putting the decals into the cockpit. And as many of the little facets as this cockpit has, it's tough to get a decal that small to fold over those facets. And there's not really, you know, you put a drop of Solvaset in there, and because you got so much decal in such little room, it just spreads everywhere. I would have preferred it, and I actually did on the second side, was to cut that decal into smaller pieces so that you had one piece for each facet rather than trying to get it to mold over the sides of the facet. So it's like kind of like putting a decal on a diamond and expecting all of the different facets to get equally covered. Sort of the same problem you have with R2 here, where they give you one circular decal and it's supposed to fit down over a dome. And you know, anybody who's tried putting a decal on a dome, the smaller the circle is, the more you have to cut it up to make it fit. I'm not saying that, you know, they needed to make each one of those a separate, so I can get it in focus, each one of those a separate decal, but there's no way to get that to lay, this flat decal to lay over a dome evenly. So you've got to put little stress cuts in it, or relief cuts in it, to get it to do that. But now that I have gotten the decal, and I've got Luke, I'm sorry, I've got the cockpit, and I've got Luke, and I've got this R2 decaled. Whew, I need to let that stuff breathe, let it dry, let it settle down, and I'm going to try to do some of the decaling work that's out away from it, that is flat, and things will lay down nicely and evenly because I need a break. Okay, I'm back at the decaling after taking an hour or so away and letting things settle. I got to say, even though it looks like I'm a little off on my registration, the way that those decals settled down on R2's head are astounding. And that's just a little bit of Solvaset and those fine decals from Bandai. But the cockpit is looking very good. The ones that I've decided to put on the sides of the hull, they've puckered in around all the raised panelings. They look real nice. So another round of these, and then we'll be ready to give this a final coat, or final wash and a gloss coat, and we'll be done, or a flat coat, and we'll be done. Okay, I'm allowing the last bits of the decals to dry, and the last little bits that I put on there. I'm letting those dry. It's now time to take the masks off of the painted canopy. You'll see that that has been painted over completely, but the clear bits that I want to keep clear have been masked. So now we take, very carefully, we peel off the vinyl masks, and we see that we have very clear canopies now. That's a thumbprint. I can clean that off. But these, take off the ones on the sides. Gotta be careful not to dig into the clear part. You don't want to gouge that. So I'm just doing a very shallow up underneath. There you go. Just pick your favorite corner and work from there. So now you have a very clean and clear canopy. And that will be ready to go once everything else on there has dried. I've just been working a little bit more on the decals on R2 and Luke here. Eminently easier to put these ones on than the tiny ones that were in place on the ship. But I just need to do the arm, the shoulder / arm side decals on R2, and then he'll be done as well. Okay, I just put the final flat coat on the X-Wing, and now the only remaining thing to do is the thing that I like doing when I'm working with a, particularly something in this scale of a fighter, or a, well, I did it on the Yamato, which I guess kind of negates that whole theory. But what I do is I take, let me see, where is it? It is the chrome. This is the Vallejo Model Air Metallic Chrome. And I just squeeze a little out on my mixing dish. Take a dry brush, and then I just touch it on the leading edge of things to show where paint might have been scraped off. Just not all over, just here and there, just on the very edges of things, to give the slight indication where paint might have been chipped off. And I want to make sure I put it in just on the leading edge of things, not all over, just where, you know. And particularly since an X-Wing is an atmospheric craft, you get more of this than you would, say, on a starship or something that doesn't do any atmospheric work, where you get more damage and weathering. So just on the tiniest leading edge of things. Don't know whether it's even being picked up by the camera. That's how slight it should be. Just on the tips of things. Now I may want to go ahead and do these guns a little bit more elaborately, but I can see where just on the tips of these C shapes, I can see tearing a little bit of that off and hit the highlights of some of these raised bits on the engines back here. Oh, you didn't see it because I didn't have the camera on at the time, but I did take some black and just re-blackened the ends of these cans here so that they would look like they had more soot damage on them. Yeah, just, you know, just hit the high spots. Every what they used to call a whip stitch. Every little whip stitch I would just put just enough in there to catch the light if you shine on it directly. It's your last chance to hide any little blemishes or dings. You can also just put a little silver over top of that. Oh, I like that. And if you drag it across, you can get a almost a paint scratch look to it. Again, it's not something you would put on the back ends of things. You would put, this is strictly leading, stupid compressor. This is strictly leading edge stuff. Now there's one more pass of maybe some deep rusting in here that I want to use. I want to take advantage of. Now that I've got the flat coat down, I want to give a look of maybe a running oil or running grease, so that would be glossy. If you had a fuel spill that was fresh, it would still be glossy. So that's again just up the corners of the cockpit. There, beautiful. And between that and the base, which I've just been painting some shades and some shadows in, and the I won't say that's suggestive. No, I won't say that the charges don't look like fluorescent sperm. No, you won't see that from me. So I'll let your own Freudian nightmare of this particular piece of the model. So let's put this last bit together and finish it off. Oh, one last thing before we're done. I want you to get a nice close-up look at the pilot and the R2 unit. It's tough to see with the lamp whether you're getting the full, there you go, the full effect, whether it's in shadow or shade or whatever, but there you go, front and back. And that's a nice little companion piece that you can kind of set down. I might be tempted to put that next to my 1/72 scale Falcon, since it is again the same scale, and that is a ground-based display. So I think the temptation would be just to lay that next to or sit that down next to the characters that came with the Falcon. So let me do a little bit of final cleanup here, because we are donezo. And there you go. I tried to drag up the fancy space background for you, but that's the final 72nd scale X-Wing 1 week build. It's a Bandai, so I was actually stretching it to make it last a week. I could have done it much quicker, but this nice little leisurely pace is kind of working for me these days. Well, that's going to do it for this week. One quick 1 week build of the X-Wing. Ooh, I just noticed how, I'm wondering when this whole thing is over with and we are, struggling out of our bunkers and squinting into the daylight to rejoin the world, how many of us are really going to need a good haircut. I imagine the barbershops that are losing all the business now and the hair cutting places that are losing the business now are really going to be making up for it when they get their post COVID-19 haircuts. That and just going out and buying new clothes and getting rid of your old sweats and all that kind of stuff is going to be a big booming business after it's all said and done. But here you go. We have finished the 1/72nd scale X-Wing, and like I said, I took my sweet time doing this. I really laid into it and took a lot of extra time because I've got the time, not in any particular rush. Could have knocked this out in a couple of days, but chose to take my sweet time, again using this Vallejo primer that I was not all that familiar with, and it said it needed more time to dry, so I figured I would go ahead and give it that time. But there you go. Painted the all of the markings on here are painted via templates so that you don't have to use the decals that came with the kit, which is handy because even here, even the few scant decals that I did use, I can really see the difference when it comes to putting washes over them, whether or not it's going to soak into the colored area. If it's paint, no problem. It soaks right in like it's supposed to, but it kind of beads off of the decals, even if you put a spray over them. It just acts differently because it's going on top of paper or the film that the decal's made of rather than paint. So something to think of. If you can paint things, paint them. Your weathering will look so much better, and it does give you a better sense of scale to paint things than it does to use decals. A lot less like a toy. This thing even had stickers, like I'm going to use stickers on a kit. But painting the canopy, something I always like doing when I can make masks for the canopies. So there you go. And of course at this scale, pushing it up that close to the camera, it looks huge. Now I can make a match set with my X-Wing and TIE Fighter. So everybody should have a matching X-Wing and TIE Fighter. I'm rambling now because I'm figuring this video is running fairly short. So until next time, I've got a fun kit. I've got I mentioned it yesterday. Looking forward to digging into some of it this weekend and kind of wrapping my head around it so that Monday I can hit the ground running with it. So until then, you be good, you wash your hands, you stay safe, don't kill each other even though you're in captivity. Build models. Keep calm and build models. That's my motto. So until next week, be good to each other. We'll see you here next time.